For people who have questions, just raise your hand and someone will come with a microphone.
My question is, what kind of activism do you think is best in this situation? According to Mr. Bryson's letter here, we have a choice tomorrow of whether or not to publicly picket his decisions and the Canadian-Colombian Free Trade Agreement, or to come and ask him questions and to challenge his issues. So I would just have to ask, what do you think is better, public protest or private confrontation?
Well, I'll just speak as a parliamentarian. The most effective voices that you can have are not voices that go to your MP, if you've already done that, and I know many people have spoken to him privately about this agreement, that the most effective voices you can have is when you write to the local newspaper, when you send a letter to him, but you copy Michael Ignatieff and you copy other Liberal members of Parliament and send a copy to me too, so I'm aware of it. And what that means is people are seeing that in Wolfville, in King's Hands, there are many people opposed to this agreement. Because that's what an MP will try to do is minimize your opposition. He will try to privatize it so that it's not public. He wants to he'll have you in a room and he'll privatize that, and then he'll go to Ottawa and he'll say, oh, nobody's concerned about that agreement. Nobody's concerned, or I've had a few meetings, but it's not a real problem. But if you're writing to the weekly newspaper every week, somebody different is writing in. If what you're doing is talking on the radio, if you are sending letters that are public, because you're also copying a whole variety of people, and I think on this sheet you've got a whole number of email addresses, then it's no longer a private conversation. It is a public chastising. And that's how you get political change, is when you're very public and stand up. And remember, in Colombia, people don't have that option. If they stand up publicly, they, in many cases, will be threatened. In some cases, they will die. So we have to give voice to Colombians that don't have that option.
Angela, would you just clarify the time for the rally?
Yes. Sorry, the rally is actually at 12 o'clock, and the invitation, I believe, is 12:30, right? So you could conceivably do both, but we definitely would love to have you come to the rally. And perhaps we can decide at the rally if we want to proceed here, or a few of us may want to come down. Yeah.
Jim and I were in a village in Colombia, and a para organization came through, and we were able to identify them as one of the meanest ones, one that brags about putting little kids' heads on the top of their bayonets after they sliced them. And they came into the village and gave each person in the village a small note in very, very simple Spanish saying, "You will vote for Uribe." And a small piece of paper. And they actually gave Jim and I a copy of this. Their boss saw this and began, searching and putting us down. And of course, who were we? Well, we were not researchers, which is in fact what we were. Of course, we became stupid Canadians who were around looking at the scenery and so on. And we mentioned that we lived right near a great big military base, and so we were good people. And they went, Canadians, because Canada had refused to go to Iraq, basically. That was their basis. So I guess I really want to pick up on these 7 bases that, in fact, Obama has agreed that the U.S. is going to take over in the United States, because those bases already know in Venezuela and around there's a pact to beat them. Those bases are seen as an assault on Venezuela and as a prop to this killer regime in Colombia. And you know, I think of this free trade agreement as Canada taking over, so teaching the paras no longer to spit at us. Because Canada is going to have the cojones, the balls, if you will. Canada's going to have the balls to have the first free trade agreement with this killer regime first. And then, in order to protect it even, a contingent of Canadians are going to go. And I think that's very possible. That in this particular situation, we may have another war brewing too. So there are 10 and there are 20 reasons, and maybe this one is just me being paranoid, but I think that this is not just about free trade, again, as you all said. I think this is about training a bunch of people. Listen to Scott Bryson in terms of what he thinks Chavez is. Scott Bryson, the foam comes out of his mouth. Anyway, it's a point I want to make that when you hear him anytime telling you you're supporting democracy, remember that little story about that village, please. Because there's only 100 people voting in that village, folks, and if they don't get 100% return, that village will be wiped out. They will be disappeared. Those people will be disappeared. And every one of them knew that that's what was the message. Excuse me.
Yeah, my name is Gary Randall, and just to comment or throw it out here, where do you get your biggest bang for the buck tomorrow? If Scott was really interested in hearing what all of you had to say, he would be sitting here quietly listening. And Scott, I guess, decided not to come because he couldn't get at least 10 minutes or more, right? So does he want to listen, or does he really want you to hear what he has to say? You know, I think he already spoke volumes when he wrote this letter, I suppose, where he's at. The thing that bothers me is, like, I'm listening to the people up front here, and I don't follow this issue to any great extent, but what I hear from those people up there is totally different than what I read and what Scott's comments are, right? And you both went to the same country, and I guess you could probably meet with different people. But could you have the blinders on that much? Could somebody have the blinders on that much to be that totally opposite? And if so, who the heck is he really listening to? Like, he's not spending all of his time in Colombia and getting all the information. Could he be listening to other people up here? Or like, you know, it's totally different. It's totally two opposites. So just try to clarify that.
I'd love to respond to that on 2 fronts. One, since 1994, fantastic journalist named Alfredo Milano has written about media within Colombia. And at that point in time, 1994, Plan Colombia wasn't really even being implemented, wasn't even being thought about yet. He was arguing that all, essentially, information related to civil war, murder of human rights activists, unionists, etc., had to be actually filtered, had to be approved through the media. Now, a lot of people were like, oh, well, you know, that's a bit much. We understand privatization, centralization of media, etc., etc. However, right now, the vice president, Francisco Santos Calderon, was the former editor, and his family owns the largest media enterprise in the country. They control 80% of all print and news televised media. So in the countryside, there is no newspaper. We've actually experienced people follow